Hey everyone, today we're going to be adding a model and animations to our enemy so it's not just this boring box. At the end, instead of a capsule or a box, you're going to have an actual model that animates when it's idle and when it's chasing the player. To get started, let's make sure our file system is ready for our enemy. We already have an assets folder and a models folder. We're going to create a new folder here for our enemies. Now, if you already have your own enemy model or something else that you're working on, that's totally fine. I'm going to be using Mesh to Motion. Now, this is a free and open source Mixamo alternative. We're actually going to be using this model right here as our example for an enemy. Then we have a whole list of animations here on the right side. We can pick and choose whichever we want. We're just going to go for an idle and a walking animation. Now, if you want to go for one of these dancing animations as your idle, go for it. That's your choice. But you can go up to the filter here and just type in idle. And let's do maybe this fighting idle. That kind of looks cool. We'll add that in with a check. And then we can also search for a, let's see if they have a chase. No, that's a dancing to Charleston. We don't want that. Let's do a walk. We have a walk loop. That looks pretty good. We can add that. So we have two animations created. Next, we're going to click this download button. And that's going to give us a GLB file, and that is what we can import into our projects. Now, it should auto import, and if for some weird reason it doesn't, you just take that GLB file and drag it into your project, and you should get this GLB and this PNG file, which is what it's using for its texture. Let's double click that GLB file. I'm going to move this import window so we can see what's going on. You should see your model, and within that, you should see the animation player, and the fighting idle, which you can actually play, and the walking animation. Now, just to cover our bases, there are some settings in here that you can pick, and we might want to actually adjust some of these so that they are looping. Right now, if we play this, it'll stop right at the end. And on the right side, we can switch this to be a linear loop mode. And if we do that, that means it's going to be set up to loop. It's a good idea to look at these beforehand before you do the import and get those settings right. You can also go to the walk. We want that to loop as well. We can check that, and that's working. And then within the meshes, we have our main mesh with its T-pose, and we should be ready to go. So let's re-import that. We now have our GLB file, and let's add this to our enemy scene. So in the last episode, we created a simple enemy scene, and we currently have our rather ugly rectangular box in there. We're going to get rid of that, hide it for now. Let's drag in our GLB file. You could instantiate the scene. We're just going to do it this way for now. We're going to drag it in there. Your example enemy scene will pop up. We can move that to the top there. And you'll notice that we have our ever so handsome model guy sitting on our scene. Once you add your model, one thing to check is to make sure that the proportions are correct, which in our case it is. But if it's too big, obviously make it fit your collision box, and if it's too small, make it bigger. Now that that's in here, let's go ahead and run our scene again just to see what's happening right now. So we're going to run this. We have a bunch of different enemies in our scene, and they're all sitting very, very still because our animation is not playing. Now, if we get up close, the animations are still not playing, and it looks like they're skating on the ground. We need to change that, and we can do that by accessing that animation player that we imported. So for demonstration purposes, we're going to right-click this node, and we're going to make it editable children, not edible children. That's a different thing. We're going to click that, and we have our animation player. So we have our fighting idle that you'll also notice that it's looping per our settings, and our walking animation, which is also looping. So we have our animation player, and we have access to both of those looping animations. Now we can manually play these animations within our enemy script. Now this is the basic version of handling animations. What you're going to want to do eventually, and what we're going to do in the next episode, is use the animation tree. That's going to give us a lot more options, and it's going to look a lot better. But this is going to give you an idea of how animations work and how we can use GDScript to call these animations. Let's go to our simple enemy script. And the first thing that we need to do is get a reference to our animation player. Now you can do that through the export, or you can do that through an onReady. We'll do it through an onReady because that's how we're doing everything else so far. And we'll call it animation player, set the type to animation player, and set it equal to we just drag this over here. And that'll give us the path to our node. Now, if you're worried about that node path changing or names of these changing, then you can do an export and use that. And if something moves or something changes, it's not going to mess it up. Now, the first thing that we want to do is get the idle animation to play immediately. So we're going to do that in our ready function. And this is actually extremely simple to do. So first, at the very bottom, we'll do a null check for our animation player. And if that exists, then we're going to get our animation player. The cool thing about the recent updates of Godot is that these animations are actually just going to pop up in your autocomplete. So we just want to play our fighting idle. And that's going to be a string name to match the name of that animation. Now when we play, all of our enemies should be in that fighting idle stance, and they are. Now if we run close to them and they start chasing us, they won't move out of that stance, but it'll still be playing. And the other thing I would say is you don't want the animations to all be in the same position, because everything doesn't look very natural. They're all moving at the same point. We can randomize that pretty easily. All we need to do is after we start our animation, we use the seek function to pick a random spot in that animation. So we'll get our animation player, seek, and within that, we need to pick a point within this range of time, and that is 0 to 1.7. So we'll do a random float within a range, and that range will be 0.0 to animation player current animation length. So that's going to give whatever that length is. We don't need to manually set that, and we'll close that off. And now all of our enemies should start at a different point in that animation and look a little bit better. In fact, let's turn off our detection here just so we can get a closer look. So now that we are all in a different part of our animation, it looks way more natural and we're not all sitting on the same spot. Perfect. All right, so let's go out of that, turn on our detection, because now we need to transition to the walking or the chase animation. Now, if you think of this logically, we're going to want that animation to start whenever we move into our follow state. Now, currently how this enemy is set up is we start an idle and then we just go to the follow state. And that follow state is just going to keep following the player. We're not switching back and forth between the idle state. The idle state in this case is sort of like the enemy has not been activated yet. So we're going to be sticking within the follow state, and we have two spots that we need to adjust where our animation plays. First, we need to transition to walking if we're moving. So if there's any velocity movement, we want to switch to that walking animation. We can do that right after we set the velocity of our navigation agent. So we're going to add a if animation player and animation player current animation does not equal walk, animation player play walk. So this means whenever we have a velocity and we're moving, we're going to check if that current animation is already playing walk, and if it's not, play walk, and gotta capitalize that. Now we can actually test this, and we'll go back to our scene. We have our detection back on, so when I get close, now we've got our enemies walking. Now these are not root motion, so the animation is not determining how far they travel. You just have to sort of adjust the speed a little bit. In fact, let's do that now and go to simple enemy, follow speed. Let's make it 2. See it a little bit slower to make it a little bit more natural. It's a little better. Might go a little bit slower. Let's do 1.5. So if you're not using root motion, you kind of have to play with this and get the right feel. So that's a little bit better. There's some skating still, but if you want that sort of like grounded movement, then you're going to want to do root motion. So we have our animation for our walking now, but they're going to keep walking even if they stop moving. So for this video, let's go ahead and back to the enemy script. And we do have a section here if the nav agent is finished, and then we set the velocity to 0. So whenever they reach the point that they want to reach, we stop the velocity. We can also change our animation. So if animation player and animation player current animation does not equal fighting idle, remember that's the name of our animation, then I want to play fighting idle. And I keep naming it animation, but it's actually animation player. So now when the enemy reaches the point it wants to reach, it'll go back to idle. I think we do need to adjust the target desired distance, maybe increase this to 2. Let's play it and let's see if we can get them to stop moving. There we go. So that stops moving. If we move away again, increase the distance. They start walking again, exactly what we needed for them to do. Now we can do a lot more polish with this, and we're gonna be doing that in the next episode. And the difference between this type of setup, which honestly I wouldn't recommend if you wanna get a really fluid animation, the difference between this and the animation tree is going to be huge. So that's the next episode, but this will get you started so you're not dealing with just boring capsules and blocks. As always, you can get the source files for this on my Patreon. All that support helps make these videos possible. And thank you so much to everyone who is currently a subscriber. We're gonna be having a lot more of these videos. We had a little bit of a slow month because of GDC, but we're gonna jump back into it and get our main game loop going, because it would be kind of nice to maybe get rid of these guys so they don't keep following us, right? All right, so I'll catch you in the next one. And as always, keep creating.